Okay, so once again, good day. I just want to introduce first the topic about the global human resource management. So, of course, human resource management is human resource management at public and private company that operates in more than one country or continent is known as global human resource management. No, it entails supporting, managing, and engaging personnel all throughout the world. No, while implementing common policies, while also considering local laws, customs, and culture. So, while a company may use a single name and provide identical products and services all over the world, workers in different operating nations may have very different requirements. So typical working hours and salary benchmark may differ. No, workplace facilities, communication, procedures, no, and management frameworks may be affected by cultural variations. So furthermore, each country's regulations may necessitate a unique approach to taxation, employment contracts, statutory benefits, and performance management. So under a single employer brand, this can be a complicated set of variables to manage. Okay? To give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. Can everybody clear me?
Yes.
Hear me? Yes. So today we are going to cover the last chapter of our subject, which is the Managing Global Human Resources. So, and this is going to be the final chapter of our entire subject. So now more managers and employers today, they find themselves managing people internationally. So the purpose of this chapter is to improve the effectiveness at applying the human resource knowledge and skills when global issues are involved. So the topics we will discuss include internationalization of business, inter-country differences that affect HR, improving international assignments, and by means of selection, training, and maintaining international employees. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so at the end of the chapter, we are expected to, number one is to list the HR challenges of international business. And the next one, illustrate with examples how inter-country differences affect HR. And the third one is to list and briefly describe the main methods for staffing global organizations. Fourth one. The fourth one is to discuss some important issues to keep in mind in training, appraising, and the fifth one. So the fifth one is to explain with examples how to implement a global human resource management program. So now, huge firms have had long, extensive overseas operations, but the globalization of the world economy, even yung mga small firms are discovering that the success depends on marketing and managing overseas. So now taking the company global, it triggers various management challenges, and the employers must install all those management systems it needs to manage its overseas activities. And these management systems include organizational structures, manager controls, worldwide banking relationships, and of course, the human resource management systems, which are used for recruiting, selecting, training, appraising, and compensating its workers abroad. So now, managing human resources internationally creates unique challenges or unique global challenges. So for example, we should staff the local offices abroad with local or US managers. So how should we appraise and pay them? How should we appraise and pay our local employees? Or how should we deal with unions in our offices abroad, and also managers will address how do they identify and get the right talent and skills to where they need them, and also how do they spread the state of the art knowledge to their operations abroad. So these challenges don't just come from various or vast distances involved. So the bigger issue here is coping with the cultural, political, legal, and economic difference among countries. So for example, in China, for instance, so in China, unions are relatively powerful, while in Europe, firing an employee could take a year or more. So while companies that operate within the US generally have the a luxury with dealing relatively a limited set of these economic, cultural, and legal variables. But since US is a capitalist competitive society, and while this US workforce reflects a multitude of cultural and ethnical backgrounds and shared values, this helps blur the cultural differences, right? Okay, so the shared values and the appreciation of democracy, this helps to blur the cultural differences. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, please. So now, inter-country differences that affect the international human resource management. One is cultural factors, right? Okay, so cultural factors, since countries differ wildly in their cultures, so in other words, cultures are the basic values the citizens adhere to, and how those values manifest themselves in those nations' arts, social programs, and simply the way of doing things. So for example, so in a study or a research about 330 managers from Hong Kong, mainland China, and US, so the US managers tended to be most concerned with how the how to get the job done, whereas Chinese managers were most concerned with maintaining a harmonious environment. And while Hong Kong managers fell between these extremes. So there's a study, a classic study by Professor Geert Hofstede. So he identified other international cultural differences. For example, so Professor Hofstede says societies differ in power distance. So in other words, what this means is the extent to which the less powerful members of the organization accept and expect an unequal distribution of power. So he also concluded that acceptance of such inequality was higher in some countries like Mexico, so than others like Sweden. So similarly, compared to the U.S. employees, Mexican workers expected managers to keep their distance rather than to be close and to be formal rather than informal. And in Germany, you should never arrive even a few minutes late, and you should address the senior people formally with their titles. So such cultural differences are a two-way street. So for example, in the Intel core booklet, or the manufacturer of some computers, or the processor of computers. So the things that you need to know about working in the USA for incoming workers for Intel that comes from abroad include sexual harassment and recognition of gay and lesbian rights. Okay. Next, ma'am. The next differences is in the economic systems. So, and economic systems, and these are translated into differences in human resource policies. So for one thing, some countries are less wedded to the ideals of capitalism. So for instance, or for example, some countries in the European Union tend to put more restrictions in the number of hours an employee can legally work each week. And for the workers in Portugal or Portuguese workers, they average about 1,980 hours of work per year. So while in Germany, the workers' average hours per year is 1,648 hours. So we can see here that the differences in labor costs are substantial. So for example, the oil production industry. So the oil production workers' compensation cost range from 27.5 US dollars in Mexico, in USA to $23.82 and about 34.21 in Germany. And several European countries, including the UK and the Germany, require substantial severance pay. This severance pay are given to departing employees, and usually in Germany it equals to the 1 year of service. While in France, they can expect 2.5 days of paid holiday leave per full month of service per year. And Germans also, they get about 18 vacation leaves per year, paid vacation leaves per year. So next, then we have legal differences. So, and these legal differences blindside even yung mga sophisticated companies. And for example, after spending billions expanding into Germany, so this company, Walmart discovered that Germany's commercial laws discourage ads based on price comparisons. So, and this is what exactly Walmart did in the US. But obviously, what Walmart did in the US, or the same method Walmart used in the US, cannot be replicated in Germany. So that's why they will have to leave Germany. So other examples, the US practice of employment at will. So it does not exist in Europe or in the European Union. So in Europe, where firing or laying off of workers is usually expensive. So in Europe, just like I mentioned a bit earlier, it takes about a year to actually fire somebody in Europe. So in many European countries, work councils replace the work of management medications, which is typical in the US firms. So, and where these councils are formal and their employees are selected groups of workers representatives that meet monthly with managers. So they are discussing topics ranging from no smoking policies up until layoffs. Okay, so then we have something known as co-determination. And co-determination is a rule in Germany and several other countries. And this means employees have the right or have the legal right to voice in setting company policies. So they also elect, or the workers elect also their own representatives to the supervisory board of the employer. So for in comparison with in US, so HR policies are on most matters like wages and benefits. These wages and benefits are set by the employers or in negotiations with its labor unions. So now managing globally requires monitoring political risks, and political risks are governmental actions or politically motivated events that could adversely affect let's go back to the last slide now. So these political risks are any governmental actions or politically motivated events that could adversely affect the long-run profitability or value of the firm. So for example is the president of the Philippines moved to nationalize the country's oil industry. So obviously, it will have some effect on companies who want to move to the Philippines. So, and another example of political risk is when the president of the Philippines increased the tariffs or the taxes on imports. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, then we move on to HR abroad. Basically, we take two examples, which is papindot po, ma'am. Yes, we take two examples, which is Europe and China. One click pa, ma'am. Yeah. So our examples here are Europe and China. So you'll see how they're different from us, and they're different from the rest of the world. So over the past 2 decades, the separate countries of the former European community unified into a common market. And this common market is for goods, services, and capital. And they call it the EU or the European Union. So the tariffs for goods moving across countries or borders from one EU country to another, it generally disappeared, and the employees within this European Union are now more free to move between jobs between these countries. So basically, the introduction of a single currency, which is the euro. So right, in Europe they have a single currency, which is the euro. So the euro further blurred these differences. So companies doing business in Europe must adjust their HR policies and practices to the directives of this European Union or the laws of the European Union, as well as to specific employment laws of each country. So for example, let's take the minimum European Union wages. So most of the EU countries or the European Union countries have minimum wage systems, and some of the countries in the EU are set national limits. So others of them allow employers and unions allowed to work out of their own minimum wages. So while working hours in European Union sets the work week for 48 hours. So the EU set 48 hours per week, but most of these European Union countries set it at 40 hours a week. And employee or union representation. So this EU or the European Union has many levels of employee representation. So for example, in France, for instance, so employers in France with 50 or more employees must consult with their employees representatives on matters including like work conditions, training, and profit sharing plans and layoffs. While in Italy, so in Italy, all employers with 15 or more employees must consult with their work councils on internal work rules. Then we have termination of employment. So like I said, it could be quite difficult to terminate employees in the European Union zone. So the required notice periods when dismissing employees in the European Union range from 9 months in Spain and 2 months in Italy. While here in the Philippines, it's I think 30 days. Then we have China. So now all employers in China deal with issues including scarce employment and increasing active union movement. So, but however, how they deal with these issues depends on the ownership of the firm. So in China kasi, most of the firms are state-owned. So since they are state-owned enterprises, they use fewer modern HR management tools um, than other Chinese multinationals like Lenovo, for instance. So when it comes to recruiting, because of these governmental constraints on migration and other legal constraints, it is relatively difficult to recruit, hire, and retain good employees in China. So at least until a economic downturn started in 2008, where there are labor shortages that is widespread in China. So and China's new employment or contract law requires, among many other things, that um, employers in China must report the names, the sexes, the identification numbers, and the contract terms for all the employees they hire within 30 days of hiring to local offices. So, and in China, recruiting effectiveness depends largely on non-recruitment HRM issues. So, and employees in China are highly career-oriented. So in China, they are highly career-oriented, and they gravitate towards employers that provide the best career advancement and training opportunities. So for example, firms like Siemens China, so they provide impressive training and development programs. So they have the least difficulty in attracting good candidates. And poaching employees. So here in the Philippines, we term it as pinirata. So pinipirata yung iba sa atin na from the same industry. So in China, poaching employees is a serious matter. So the employer must verify first that the applicant is free to sign a new employment agreement. So when it comes to selection, the dominant employee selection method, so the method that is widely used in China, involves analyzing the applicant's resume, and then they interview him or her. So just like here in the Philippines. The ideal way of doing this is to institute a structured interview process, as many of the foreign firms in China have done. So then we have appraisal. So the employer is particularly sensitive to cultural realities in China. So and the appraisal therefore needs to follow the formalities of saving face-to-face, or they are avoiding. So in China, they are avoiding confrontational tension producing situations. So in general, it's best to talk in terms of objective work data, as opposed to personal comments like, for example, you're too slow. Okay, so in China, they like to talk, or you want to talk to in terms of numbers, or in terms of data, in terms of last year's performance versus to this year's performance. So in China, don't make it personal, and try to avoid being confrontational when it comes to working in China. So then we have compensation. Although many managers endorse performance-based pay in China, many employers in China preserve group harmony, so they make incentive pay a small part of the pay package. So, and as in many other parts of the Asia, like in the Philippines, so team incentives are highly advisable. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide, please. Then we have staffing the global organization. So filling the company's jobs abroad has traditionally been the heart of the international human resource management. So, and the process involves identifying and selecting the people who will fill the positions, then placing them in those positions. So let's have a look at the different types of employees. First one is locals or local employees. So these are the citizens of the countries where they are working. So whereas expatriates are non-citizens of the countries in which they are working. So for example, an American working here in the Philippines is called an expat or expatriate. Now, home country nationals. So home country nationals are citizens of the country in which the multinational company has headquarters. For example, an American working for Ford subsidiary in China. So they are called home country nationals as well as an expatriate or expat. And third country nationals, so these are citizens of a country other than the parent or the host country. For example is a British executive working in Japan, in Tokyo branch of a US multinational bank like Citibank. So he would be known as the third country national and of course an expat or an expatriate. Next slide, please. Paki-click po, ma'am. Isa po. So, expatriate, ay, pabalik po. So, expatriates still represent many reasons why employers rely more on locals. So many people don't want to work in a foreign company, and the cost of using expatriates is usually far greater than the cost of using local workers. So there's one research or one survey. So employers reported a 21% attrition rate for expat employees compared with an average of 10% for their general employee population. So local people may view the multinational as a better citizen if it uses or if they use local management talent. And also, like here in the Philippines, our government is pressing to staff these global organizations or global companies with locals or with local management. So, and there also may be a fear that expats, knowing that they are at the foreign subsidiary, so they are, and for only a few years, they may overemphasize on short-term results. So there are also reasons for using expats. So they're either home country or a third country nationals for staffing subsidiaries. So the main reason is for using expats is usually the employers can find the local candidates that requires or that have the or that has the technical qualifications for the job. And multinationals also viewed a successful stint abroad as a required step in developing top managers. So, for instance, after a term in abroad, the head of General Electric returned as vice chairman. So the control is another important reason for using expats. So the assumption here is home country managers are already steeped in firm's policies and the cultures of the firm, and thus they thus more likely to apply this headquarters way of doing things. Then we have other solutions, of course, in staffing global organizations. So today, the choice is not just between expats versus local employees. So there are other solutions as well. Some of these are a short-term commuter or the frequent flyer assignments. So these frequent flyer assignments, they involve much travel, but no formal relocation. So sample company of these here in the Philippines is Manila Water and HP. Okay, so other firms use internet-based video technologies and group decision-making software to enable virtual teams to do business without either travel or relocation. So this is prevalent, especially during this time of pandemic. So or most global companies are going virtual. So there is a one survey or research, and it found out that about 78% of surveyed employees had some form of localization policy. So, and this localization policy is a policy of transferring a home country national employee to a foreign subsidiary as a permanent transfer. So the employer here does not treat as an expat, but instead, for example, a Philippine local hire. Then we have offshoring. So offshoring is an important international staffing issue. And offshoring means having local employees abroad to do the jobs of the firms employees previously did in-house. So, and offshoring is also increasingly popular. So offshoring and outsourcing are different things. So offshoring is the work is done overseas, like Google, Ford Motors. So for Ford Motors, they move their manufacturing of cars in Thailand. So that's a sample of offshoring technique. While outsourcing, so outsourcing is someone else does the work. So this is popular in the Philippines. We have BPO, or the business process outsourcing. So other example companies that use offshoring is Google, Microsoft also, Amazon, and Samsung. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Then we have the international staffing policy and management values. So we've seen that various factors like technical competence, this determines where the firms whether may use local or expats abroad. So, but it's not just the or it's not just that it influences decision in addition to top executive values. So they also create their own player role, and some executives are just more expat oriented. So for example, some experts classify top executive values as these three types. So one is ethnocentric, then we have polycentric and geocentric, or global company. So for ethnocentric practices, the prevailing attitude is that the home country attitudes, management style, knowledge, evaluation criteria, or evaluation criteria are superior to anything those country might have to offer, and such values translate into employment practices. And with an ethnocentric staffing policy, the firm fills a key management jobs with parent country nationals. So for example, the Royal Dutch Shell, for instance. So in Shell, for instance, financial offices around the world are often Dutch nationals. So, and the reasons given for these ethnocentric policies include the lack of qualified host country senior management applicant or talent. Then we have polycentric practices. So in polycentric corporation, there is a conscious belief that only host country managers can ever really understand that culture and behavior of host country market. So therefore, the foreign subsidiary should be managed by local people. So a polycentric oriented firm would staff its foreign subs with host country nationals and its home office with parent country nationals. So using polycentric practices may reduce the local cultural misunderstanding that may occur if it use expat managers. So it will almost undoubtedly be less expensive compared to ethnocentric. Okay, then we have geocentric practices or geocentric executives. So these executives believe they must scout the firm's management staff on a global basis, and the assumption here is that the best manager for a specific position is located anywhere or maybe in any of the countries in which the company or the firm operates. So for example, if a company appointed a CEO, someone from Australia who run the firm's US operations, so that would be a geocentric practice. Okay, so a geocentric staffing policy seeks the best people for key jobs throughout the organization, regardless of its nationality. So, and this can let the global firm use its HR more efficiently by transferring the best person to the open job wherever he or she may be. Such crossbreeding can help build a stronger and more consistent culture and set of values among the entire global management team. Next slide, please. Now, the processes the firms use to select managers for their domestic and foreign positions, obviously, they have many similarities, and for either assignment, candidates need the technical knowledge and skills to do the job, and the intelligence and people skills to be successful managers. So testing, interviewing, background checks are applicable for selecting expats as for domestic assignments. So however, these foreign assignments are different. So for example, there is a stress that being alone in a foreign land can put on the single manager and a spouse, and also the children will share the assignment. So there are also pressures that the family will have to confront abroad. So furthermore, it's not just how different culturally the host country is from the person's home country, but rather the person's adaptability is important. And some of the people adapt anywhere, but others fail to adapt anywhere. And selecting managers for assignment abroad therefore means testing them. So they are testing them for traits that predicts the success or their success in working abroad. So there is one study or one research that asked about 388 international assignees from various countries to they specified which traits are important for the success in a foreign assignment. So the researchers has identified 5 factors, and these 5 factors were job knowledge, motivation, relational skills, flexibility, and adaptability, and extracultural openness, and of course the family situation. That is the spouse positive opinion and willingness of the spouse of the expatriate who will live abroad, and so on. So family situation was generally found to be the most important factor in, and it finds consistent with other research on international assignment and transfers. And there's a recent view of the research. It reported strong support for the importance of factors like um, interpersonal skills and family adjustment for the expected adjustment in the abroad. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Now, how do we make expatriates assignment successful? So many employers post expats abroad, but it's disconcerting to see how often such assignments fail. So, and knowing how to make a successful assignment is an important management skill. So start by systemizing your expected process, and then making sure that there's an expat policy covering matters such as compensation and transfer costs. So therefore, before selecting someone to send abroad, understand where the main potential problem lies. So we've seen that having right personality is one issue. So for example, in the study of 143 expats employees, so extroverted, or those extroverts agree, and emotionally stable individuals were less likely to leave early. That is based on the research of 143 expats. And furthermore, the person's intentions are more important, or are important. And people who want expats careers try harder to adjust to them. And similarly, these expats who are more satisfied with their jobs are more likely to adapt to the foreign assignment. And some people are also culturally at ease, so do fine with the transfer anywhere, whereas the others will fail anywhere. Then when it comes to family pressures, non-work factors like these loom large expat failures. So, and one study in US managers, so listed in descending order of importance for leaving early. And one is the inability of the spouse, or just the manager's inability to adjust, and other family problems. So, and managers personally on a more emotional immaturity and inability to cope with these larger overseas responsibilities. Okay, there's also one study that identified 3 things uh, that that help make it easier to adjust when you are assigned in abroad or in a foreign land. So the first is the language fluency. So since the spouses of these expats will feel more cut off, so they can't make themselves understood. So the second is having preschool age children rather than school age children, or no children seem to make it easier for the spouse to adjust. And this suggests that the younger children, perhaps because of the increased dependency, they help the spouses retain that part of their social identities as parents. And their responsibilities for these children remain the same. And The third one, so it helps them that there be a strong bond of closeness between the spouse and the expat partner, and it provides or this provides the continuing emotional and social support many spouses find lacking abroad. Then we have something known as adaptability screening, which can be done before they go abroad. So with this adaptability screening, it is often conducted by a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and this adaptability screening, it aims to assess the assignees and the spouse also the probable success in handling the foreign transfer, and also to alert them to the issues they will be facing abroad. Here the experience is often the best predictor of future success. So companies like Colgate Palmolive, so they look for overseas candidates whose work and non-experienced education and language skills are already demonstrate a commitment to and facility for living and working with different cultures. And even someone's traveling overseas on like participating in foreign student programs might provide some basis to believe that a potential transferee can adjust when he or she arrives overseas. So employers can do several things. They can do several things to boost the odds that the assignments abroad will go smoothly. So one is providing realistic previews. So realistic previews of what to expect, and carefully screening the spouse of the expat. Improved orientation and improved benefits package are also obvious solutions. So another is simply to shorten the length of the assignment, and the person job match is also important. So insofar as expats who are more satisfied with their jobs, they are likely to adapt to foreign assignment, and also helping spouses get jobs abroad, and providing more support to the expat and his family or her family are also important in making the expatriate assignment successful. So employers or some employers set up global body programs, and local managers mentor new expatriates. Next slide, please. Then we have training and orienting and maintaining expatriated employees. Next po. So after deciding who this company send abroad, the attention now turns to providing the expatriate or the person with the training, pay, and other support he needs or she needs to be successful. So for orienting and training employees on international assignment, when it comes to this is very important for success overseas, the orientation and training, and the practice of the most US employers reflect these US employers, they are more on talk than substance. And these US executives tend to agree that international signees do best when they receive the special training in things like language and culture that they require. But however, few companies actually providing such training, which is not a good sign. pre-departure training. So pre-departure training was more of, this is more of a special training to overseas candidates. One form of specializing is in such programs prescribe a four-step approach. So the level one is, or the level one training is the training focuses on the impact of cultural differences and on raising training effectiveness or awareness of such differences and their impact on the business outcomes. And the level two training of the pre-departure training is getting participants to understand how these attitudes, both negative and positive, and how they influence behavior of the expat. So, for example, yung unfavorable stereotypes. So they may subconsciously influence how a new manager responds to his or her new foreign subordinates. Then level three, pre-departure training. So it involves the factual knowledge about the target country. And level four, in level four, they provide skills in areas like language and how they can adjust in adaptation skills. Then of course, ongoing training. So ongoing training beyond such pre-departure training. So more firms are providing a continuing in-country and cross-country and cross-cultural training during the early stages of an overseas assignment. So this is important as the pre-departure trainee. So for example, after settling the managers abroad, or after settling in the managers abroad, they need to continue those traditional skills-oriented development. The firm that practice this type of ongoing training is IBM, or the International Business Machines. So their development includes rotating or job rotation. So they help their overseas managers grow professionally. So the next topic is compensation, and it will be discussed by Ms. Amor. So thank you for listening.
Good afternoon.
Let's go ahead.
My topic, to continue the topics in global HRM. So how do we compensate expatriates? So the usual way to formulate expatriate pay is to equalize purchasing power across countries. So this technique is known as the balance sheet approach. So the focus of the balance sheet approach is the home country groups of expenses, which includes income taxes, housing, goods and services, and discretionary expenses. So the employer estimates what each of these four expenses is in the expatriate's home country and what each will be in the host country. So once na-estimate na yung mga expenses, the employer then pays any differences such as additional income taxes or housing expenses. So let's take an example of the balance sheet approach, assuming a base salary of $80,000. So here in this example, si Chicago yung home country and then si Belgium is yung host country. So for example, yung housing and utilities in Chicago is $35,000 and sa Belgium is $67,600. So yung difference nila na 32,600 is iko-compensate ni employer. So in a form of allowance. So this goes to the other expenses. So kung ano man yung difference, yun yung babayaran ni iko-compensate ni employer. So there are incentives na binibigay ni employer for international assignments. Example is yung foreign service premiums. So these are financial payments over and above regular base pay and typically range between 10% and 30% of the base pay. So this is on top of the basic salary. Next is the hardship allowances. So these are payments to compensate expatriates for exceptionally hard living and working conditions at certain foreign locations. So example dito is yung US diplomats na na-assign sa Iraq. They receive about 70% boost in base salary among other incentives. Third is yung mobility premium. So these are lump sum payments to reward employees for moving one assignment to another. So kung palipat-lipat sila ng assignment, binibigyan din sila ni employer ng ganitong incentive, yung mobility premium. Next, what are the steps in establishing a global pay system? First is you develop a global compensation philosophy framework.
Ate Amar, hindi po yata gumagalaw yung slides mo.
Hindi na gumagalaw.
Nasa 16th slide lang siya. Wala ka naman.
Wait, wait.
Yan, okay na.
Kasi pag gumagalaw po.
Nasa 16th slide pa rin siya.
Ayun. Nakikita ko ba
Ayan,
ganyan
nasa
na?
17th slide na.
Okay, so hindi ko na siya iaano. So, ganito na lang. Nababasa niyo po?
Babasa
Basa
naman
naman po.
po.
Okay. So, the steps in establishing a global pay system. First, you develop a global compensation philosophy framework. So, dito tinatanong kung yung mga pay components like salary, bonuses, and incentives is parang ano yung contribution niya to prompt mga executive actions para ma-achieve yung strategic goals. So second is you identify any gaps in existing reward system. So kung yung existing reward system may mga kailangan baguhin, yan, so ina-identify siya dito. And third is you systemize pay systems worldwide. Fourth is you adapt global pay policies to local conditions. So here you review your global pay policies, you conduct surveys and analysis to assess local pay practices. And then ipa-fine-tune mo siya to your global pay policies. So they make sense for each locations. And lastly, you conduct an ongoing pay policies program assessment. Appraising the expatriate managers. So there are challenges. So meron tayong two challenges dito. First is determining who should appraise the manager and deciding on which factors to base the appraisal. So how do we improve the appraisal process? First, we stipulate the assignment's difficulty level and adapt the performance criteria to the situation. Second, we weigh evaluation more toward on-site manager's appraisal than toward that of the home site manager. And third, if home office manager does appraisal, use a former expatriate from same overseas location for advice. In the international labor relations, the characteristics of the European labor relations are it is industry-wide centralization, employer organization, multiple union recognition, and content and scope of bargaining. So there are protective measures that needs to be taken for the safety of our international assignees. So one is the crisis management teams. So ito yung teams na pwede nilang tawagan. Just, for instance, kung may kinidnap na uh, manager, one of their manager. And second is they use intelligence services. This is for monitoring for possible threats abroad. So, employers also buy the kidnapping and ransom insurance. This is for crisis situations like kidnapping, extortion, detention, and threats to property or product. So repatriation, there are problems in repatriation. One problem is that making sure that the expatriate and his or her family don't feel the company has left them adrift. So how do we solve this? First, we match the expat and his or her family with psychologists trained in repatriation issues. Dito, the psychologists meet with the family before they go abroad. Then the psychologist discusses the challenges na may encounter nila abroad and ina-assess dito kung paano sila makaka-adapt to their new culture. And yung psychologist then he keeps in touch with them throughout their assignment. The second is make sure the expat always feels in the loop with what's happening back at the home office. Example nito is the expat gets a mentor and travels back to the home office periodically for meetings. So para maging updated. So third is to provide formal repatriation services when the expat returns home. Dito binavalue kasi yung expats experience and having a system that facilitates keeping track of employees as they move from one position to position in a global organization is essential. And one reason for returnees' high attention rates is that the employers simply lose track of the returnees' new skills and competences. So how do we implement a global HR system? So the best practices in developing worldwide human resource policies and practices. We form global HR networks and making local HR managers a part of global teams. And remember that it's more important to standardize ends and competencies than specific methods. How do we make the global HR system more acceptable? So there are best practices like remember that global systems are more accepted in truly global organizations. So we investigate pressures to differentiate and determine their legitimacy, and we try to work within the context of a strong corporate culture. So implementing the global HR system, we should have a constant contact, bagay yung communication, and then we dedicate adequate resources for a global HR effort. So there are the best global HR practices na yung mga pwede. So we work with existing local systems. We integrate global tools in local systems. We create a strong corporate culture. We create a global network for system development. The global input here is critical. We treat local people as equal partners in system development. We assess common elements across geographies. We focus on what to measure and allow flexibility in how to measure. So allow for local additions beyond core elements. We differentiate when
Okay na, Doc.
necessary.
Balik na po ako.
We train local people to make good decisions about which tools to use and how to do so. Of course, in communication, we also have dedicated resources for global HR efforts and to know or have access to someone who knows the legal requirements in each country. So ano naman ang mga hindi pwede? So try to do everything the same way everywhere. Yield to every claim that we're different. Make them prove it. Force a global system on local people. We using local people just for implementation, hindi rin pwede. So using the same tools globally unless you can show that they really work and are culturally appropriate. Ignoring cultural differences, kasi cultural differences vital. So let technology drive your system design. You can't assume every location has the same legal of technology investment and access. And then lastly, assuming that if we build it, they will come. You need to market your tools or system and put change management strategies in place. So that's all for our report.
Okay, so thank you very much. I just want to give
Thank
some
you po.
additional inputs for this topic. Of course, a while ago, as I mentioned, that the most up-to-date global human resource cloud software platforms and solution can assist organizations with policy planning and management, as well as ensuring compliance with local laws. No? So, alam naman natin, pag sinabi natin na global, automatically, let's say, meron Jollibee sa other country, may Jollibee sa Pilipinas, merong 7-Eleven sa other country. So, therefore, that is globally, di ba? So, how they will be able to coordinate, how they will be able to monitor the sales and everything. It's just through cloud software, no? Okay. So, with the available of computer, we tailored workforce experiences. No, we customize communications. Now deliver business updates, target communication to specific groups, and gather feedback with surveys. No, some personal experiences create engaging branding experiences tailored by group or region, and connect global teams by managing your entire workforce, whether they are, and embed global policies while enforcing local regulations, and help them strive anywhere, support employee well-being, provide localized benefits, packages, and more. So the powerful and actionable HR analytics, no? So it gains instant visibility, no? Gain complete visibility of your entire workforce through human resource analytics, enabling actionable insights in seconds. No? It provides real-time insights. Now, give leaders up to the minute analytics and recommendations so they can analyze the emerging trends quickly and adjust plan as needed. So it customized dashboard, no? Because personal dashboard to plan hiring and analysis attrition, manage absences, and more. So it also gather actionable feedback. It get clearly on the employee life cycle with surveys and pulls tailored to different groups and functions. So it attract and retain talent, no? Automate new acquisition, candidate screening, reference checks, and interview scheduling. So accelerate hiring decisions and reduce attrition by creating employer branded experiences, and make onboarding a breeze with self-service access to automated forms and tailored communication. So we just simply put a video presentation on how we'll be able to yung onboarding ng ating mga new employees, no? The automated HR can cut an unnecessary admin and paperwork by automating core human resource processes easily. No, it accelerates digital and business transformation by connecting your teams digitally and boosts human resource productivity. It reduces errors, no, dahil walang masyadong human intervention, and spend more time adding value. So it drives new ways of working because it design new ways of working with a no-code, highly configurable system built on a software, no? So configure workflows, adapt policies, and measure impact to enable agility and business success. It unlock continuous innovation through real-time employee feedback. So yun lang naman yung additional area na mag-i-improve pagdating sa ating global human resource, no? So we see to it that we could able to adapt cloud computing, no? Kasi nga po dapat lahat ng data, even yung may-ari nasa other country, it's too easy for him or for her to monitor all the incomes, no? Even the problem, and they could able to do decision making as faster as they can, provided na lahat ng mga board nakikita yung mga report through cloud, anywhere, anytime, no? Provided syempre with internet connections, no? And at the same time, as what our presenter mentioned, it's too important to adapt, no? To adapt different laws within the region. Kasi syempre, kung nasa UK yon or nasa US man yan, hindi pwedeng the same yung pinapatupad nating human resource policies. Kailangan ina-adapt natin kung saang country andun yung ating business. No? Kung sa Philippines, and at the same time, even in our country lang, no? Iba yung mga policies na mayroon sa Cebu, iba ang policies na mayroon sa Region 4A, iba rin yung nasa NCR. No? Especially when it comes to salary. And at the same time, it depends upon to their task. No? Kasi kung may hazard yung kanilang trabaho, di ba, may hazardous pay. Pero hindi lahat ng task na the same, the same ng position, pero magkaiba ng location, possibly yung isa may hazard pay, yung iba wala. Ano? So yun, case-to-case basis. But again, if it is global, we need always to consider the local laws. Okay? So I think that's it.